What's up guys, welcome to the channel. This is a brand new series where I'm going to talk about my journey on the football based NFT game Sorare. I'm assuming if you've clicked this you already know a bit about Sorare, so I won't be doing too much explaining in this one. But if you are new to the game, there's a ton of great content creators out there who have good resources on what Sorare is and how to get started, so make sure to do your own research. In this video I'm going to be taking you through my first few weeks on the game, how I started, my overall strategy going in and how that might have changed, and the mistakes and victories I've had along the way. Now, as you can tell by the title, my gallery of cards is currently worth about 3 ETH or roughly $13,000 US at the time of recording, and I will keep tracking the value of my gallery and using that as a benchmark throughout the series to see how I'm progressing and whether the choices I make over the next few weeks and months ultimately end up being successes or failures. If that sounds like a cool idea or something you might be interested in, leave me a like, subscribe to the channel, and let me know if you have any other ideas for this series in the comments below. Before we get into my Sorare account, I'll give you a bit of background on why I joined the platform. I've been a huge football fan for as long as I can remember. I've loved games like FIFA, FPL, Football Manager, and I've always been into trading cards, card collecting, collectibles in general. When I was a kid growing up in England, I used to have a collection of hundreds of little football figures called micro-stars. Used to be able to get them in pods with some chocolate inside, and I was totally obsessed with them. Anyway, I've been watching the sports card boom over the last year or so, watching content from guys like Sports Card Investor and Soccer Breakers, and I've known about crypto and NFTs for a while. I've held crypto since 2017, so when I came across Sorare, naturally I was interested. At first I was fairly critical and I found the UX a bit clunky, but I did a good 2 weeks of research and planning before I went out and picked up my first few cards. But what I found in Sorare was ultimately the combination of many of my interests in one. Football, collectibles, fantasy sports, all combined with the transparency and utility of NFTs. Unlike something like FIFA Ultimate Team, which I've played on and off for a good 8 years, in which you earn digital cards that have little to no utility once the new game comes out a year later, Sorare cards actually continue to be useful in SO5 and have a definitive and trackable supply, as well as more in-depth utility than games like FPL thanks to deeper stat tracking, which is honestly one of my favourite parts of the game. I love stats. I can't help it. So with that all being said, I started to get properly stuck into Sorare about a month ago in mid-November. The first game week I entered squads in was game week 220. Now, initially my strategy going into SO5 was similar to a lot of people, and that was to build a rare squad to grind ETH thresholds. What I quickly found is that not only is that not as fun as owning cards you actually like and know, it's more stressful because the downsides of owning rare ETH grinding cards are you're only 1 or 2 injuries or a suspension away from needing a rebuild and potentially losing a fair bit of value on the cards you already own. So after my first game week, in which I actually did hit the ETH threshold, I had a total shift in strategy and focused solely on building a solid gallery of competitive limited cards. Now some of you may think this is a mistake, but hear me out. These are my reasons for focusing on a limited collection to start off with. Firstly, and I talked to Quinny about this, I'm sure most of you know Quinny, but if you don't, he's a great Sorare content creator who you should follow, and he said it's important to start out in SO5 with cards you know and cards you like relative to your budget. Now I was lucky enough to have a starting balance big enough to pick up some big well-known names that I would never have been able to even consider in the rare market, and that's important for the future growth of the platform, right? You have to remember that 90% of new users can't afford to come in and spend money on 4 or 5 decently competitive rare cards. The barrier for entry is just too high, and it's getting even higher, even for someone like me at this point. So with that in mind, I would say most users are going to come in and start off in the limited market, which I think both makes sense and is sensible on their part. The future of the platform is going to hinge on getting casual players into the game, and that's not to say I won't be picking up rare cards in the future. I definitely will, but right now the entertainment and fun I personally get from competing and winning rewards in the lower divisions outweighs that of the all-star rare ETH grind. So my thinking when building my gallery was this: diversity, depth, and utility. I made a conscious decision to focus on U23s from Europe's top 5 leagues who are mostly first team starters at big clubs playing European football. Given that, my decision was to concentrate on playing 3 SO5 leagues to start: Limited U23, Champion Europe, and All-Star. Twice a week where possible, and focus on players with high potential and long-term utility. Again, this comes back to the continued growth of the platform. Those kind of players are going to be the best and safest investments to make over the longer term, in my opinion. So I began to build out a gallery with depth. A number of players that allowed me to compensate for injuries, suspensions, or unfavourable matchups, and that would hopefully help me win regular rewards. Rewards that are equal or close to ETH thresholds in value. If you'd like me to go through a more in-depth look on how I scouted my players and chose which particular cards to pick up, leave me a like, and I can do that in my next video. But if we take a look at Sorare data, I'm currently sitting at 40.91% for winning lineups after 5 game weeks played, having won at least 1 reward every game week played so far, and 9 rewards in total. My total rewards earned are valued at about 0.08 ETH, which is just over $300 at the time of recording. So the strategy of winning consistent rewards has worked nicely so far. Now I want to give you a brief club tour and I'll show you some of the main cards in my gallery. So let's sort through most valuable and go through my top 20 players. First up, we've got Joshua Kimmich, pretty self-explanatory, one of the best cards score-wise on the platform when he's playing. I actually picked him up just as he got COVID, so he hasn't played for me yet, but I'm waiting patiently for the new year to come around to unleash him in SO5. It's funny because he's my most valuable card and I haven't been able to use him yet, and it feels like I'm sitting on a weapon of mass destruction just biding its time to be used. Second, we've got the Wonderkid Florian, probably my favourite card in the club so far. He's just been on an absolute tear the last month and he's been a joy to watch for Leverkusen if you haven't watched him. He's number 1 for goal creating actions per 90 in Europe's top 5 leagues this season with 1.85 per 90. For perspective, Thomas Muller is in second with 1.27 and Mo Salah third with 1.20. That is just nuts. If we take a look, he's obviously been winning me cards in the U23 division. I picked him up for 0.18 and he's currently worth 0.253, an increase of a couple of $100. Naturally, I have absolutely no desire to sell him for a long time. Up next is Vinnie Jr, just another player on an absolute insane run of form in a dominant Real team. He's number 1 in Europe for most carries into the penalty area. I picked him up for 0.184 and he's obviously increased in value, but he's such a fun player to watch and to hold for the future. Now, Benzema kind of goes against my focus on youth, but what I did once I picked up my core of future stars was sprinkle in a handful of established high scorers like Benzema, Muniain, Modric, Jonas Hoffman, just to guarantee a level of score in the divisions I'm competing in. He's flying this season with 1.37 goals and assists per 90. Let's talk about my goalkeeper selection as a whole. Neuer is obviously my most valuable and easily explainable. He's the captain of a dominant Bayern side and most likely to be my first choice in a lineup builder, dependent on matchups obviously. He's actually decreased a fair bit in value since I picked him up, but I also picked up the Bayern backup just as insurance for any injury, doubts or anything like that. Up next is my nailed regular keeper in U23, Alban Lafont, one of only a handful of starting U23s in Europe's top 5 leagues and also captain of Nantes, I believe. His price just keeps increasing thanks to the shortage of U23 keepers as well. Verdecki, Rulli and Lopez are all solid, reliable starting keepers for their clubs who have been rotating in my lineups based on fixture favourability. The first two are also playing European football along with Neuer, so that gives them extra utility too. I don't have any plans to pick up more goalkeepers in the European region for a while. The next player is one of my most recent pickups, and that's Martinez. Inter are in great form at the moment and have a good run of fixtures over the next 2 months. They're the highest scorers in Serie A, and Martinez has the highest expected goals and assists per 90 stat in the entire league. Combine that with the fact I can once again play him in U23, Champion Europe or All-Star divisions, he ticks all the boxes. Lucas Hernandez is obviously a part of that dominant Bayern team and has some of the best AA averages for a defender on the platform. Upamecano would have been the preferred signing of the two, but I couldn't afford him at the time. I also just love watching Hernandez play, so him, Neuer and Kimmich form a solid stack of Bayern players for me moving forwards. I can't see them not being competitive in any division they play in. Jonathan David is up there with Wirtz as one of my favourite cards in the gallery. He's actually the very first limited card I picked up, so he holds a special place in my heart. It helps that he's putting up insane numbers this season, and once again he fits into the utility profile across all divisions. And with Lille still playing European football, for how long I'm not too sure, but David isn't going anywhere anytime soon. Great player. Pedri I picked up for the sake of collectability, and he's obviously down in price since he's been on the sidelines. Golden Boy winner, he's guaranteed game time when he returns and Barcelona will build around him. This is a long-term hold. The next card is probably the one I'm most excited about. Jamal Mussiala, what a player this kid is. The fact he's getting regular minutes off the bench in this Bayern team around Lewandowski, Muller, Koeman, etc. at his age is just insane. But when you watch him play, it makes sense. Now let me show you some stats that will blow your mind. His goals per 90 minutes are 0.44, which puts him in the 89th percentile against other attackers in Europe's top 5 leagues. Pretty good, right? But it gets even better when you drill down into more stats. His goals to shots are 0.22, the 98th percentile in Europe's top 5 leagues. Goals to shots on target, 0.58, 99th percentile. Pass completion, 84.7%, 96th percentile. Assists per 90 of 0.31, 89th percentile. Passes under pressure, 10.46 per 90, 98th percentile. Goal creating actions per 90, 0.68, of which his successful dribbles that lead to goals are 0.19, which puts him in the 99th percentile. Tackles per 90, 2.86, 98th percentile. Tackles won, 1.68, 98th percentile. His pressure statistics are just mental, with his successful pressures in the 99th percentile against other attackers. His blocks, 95th percentile, interceptions, 99th percentile, his dribbles completed, 92nd percentile. You get the idea. The kid is 18, playing for Bayern at the pinnacle of German football, playing in the Champions League. With those all-around stats, he's absolutely perfect for SO5. When he becomes a regular starter, what is this guy really capable of? So exciting. So if you take a look at this price graph on Sorare data, I actually picked him up for the lowest price anyone has picked him up for on the platform to date. 0.06 ETH. He currently sells for 0.09 and he just scored again last night against Mainz. So to say I'm excited for this card's potential is an understatement. What a player. Up next is Chua Mani, again another U23 midfielder with impressive AA scores in the middle of the park. The fact he has another couple of years of utility in U23 plus midweek European games is amazing too. Saliba I slightly overpaid for, but man, this guy puts up some huge scores even when Marseille don't keep clean sheets, and his underlying stats are a joke. Again, he fits my profile and is just such a good SO5 player. Dominic Sabozli is another young player I'm extremely bullish on. I actually owned Nkunku from Leipzig prior to picking him up, but his price rose so sharply I sold him off for a couple of $100 profit and reinvested in Musiala and Sabozli with that money. The fact Nkunku is 24, Sabozli is 21 and less than half the price with underlying stats like this is why I decided to make the switch. Goals per 90 in the 90th percentile of Europe's top 5 leagues, expected goals 93rd percentile, expected assists 95th percentile. Look at those insane passing stats. He's on set pieces, goal creating actions per 90 1.12, 99th percentile. This guy is a decisive factory when he plays. He puts in his fair share of tackles, successful pressures in the 99th percentile, blocks 98th percentile. He even wins his fair share of aerial duels. Like I said, 21 years old, playing for Leipzig with a new manager, quality like Nkunku around him. He's got so much potential. I'm really happy with this pickup. Up next is Alessandro Bastoni, 22, a regular starter in this flying Inter team with a great run of fixtures, as I said, coming up. I actually picked him up for cheap when he was injured. Now he's back and picking up huge scores, including 100 last week. He ticks all the boxes. Muniain is one of the cards I mentioned back in the bracket of Benzema and Modric, etc. Slightly older, but the captain and fulcrum of his side. His SO5 numbers are just crazy. Everything runs through him. Corners, set pieces. He's the playmaker of the team. He puts up big scores even when the rest of his team doesn't. And if you drill down into his underlying stats, you can see why. He loves to rack up key and progressive passes and is in the 93rd percentile for shot creating and goal creating actions per 90. I think Athletic are underperforming their XG this season, so if their forwards like Inaki Williams could finish their chances, I'm sure his stats would be even higher. Now, I'm conscious of how long I might be going for here, so the last player I want to talk about is Arnold Danjuma. He's been in and out of the Villarreal team with various knocks over the last month, but his dribbling and carry stats are some of the best in Europe, and he's such an explosive player to watch. He's decreased in value since I picked him up due to his inconsistency, but he scored 2 goals in the midweek, and I've no doubt he can go on a big run of consistent scores at some point in the season. So that's a brief tour of my top 20 cards and my reasons for owning them. If you want to check out the rest of my gallery, I'm Sojiwa on Sorare, and you'll see over the last week I've gone out and expanded my gallery with both Asian and MLS players ahead of the off season and in preparation for the next season. I can go through those with you in another video if that's something you'd like. Just let me know again in the comments below, or on Twitter at Sojiwa. That just about wraps up my first video in this series, my $13,000 worth of cards. Subscribe for more videos on scouting, lineups, results, rewards, and how my gallery progresses over the next few months. If you're not following me on Twitter, I put out custom graphics and reward animations for my tier 2 rewards and above, and also make sure to follow me there as I'll be doing a giveaway over the next few weeks with all my tier 3 rewards that I've collected since I started. If you're just getting started with the limited divisions in Sorare, winning that might be a great start for your club, so keep an eye out for that. If you've enjoyed the video, leave me a like, subscribe to the channel, follow me on Sorare if you want to track how I'm progressing. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.